Good morning, folks. Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, your host, and we're in luck because we're going to be talking wheat, and we're going to be talking to the Kansas State University Extension Wheat Specialist, Dr. Romulo Lollato, talking about the variability that we saw in the yields across the state and all the problems associated this year. So sit back. We're going to have words from our sponsor here in just a minute. We'll see you then.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, your host, and we're in luck because we're going to be talking about wheat, and we're going to be speaking with Dr. Romulo Lollato, the Extension Wheat Specialist here at K-State. Romulo, we had an interesting year, to say the least, across the state of Kansas, and harvest is just now winding up in the northwest corner. And so let's talk a little bit about the overview, anyway, of the wheat production this year.
Well, good morning, Jim. Thanks for having me on the show here again this morning. Yes, we did have a roller coaster year on wheat, to say the least. We did have several ups and downs throughout the growing season, and I'll be glad to talk to you about these ups and downs here today. So what are some of the things that we saw throughout this growing season? And in my opinion, I think the key word this growing season is variability.
Right.
We had a lot of variability out there. Fields that are yielding a 70 bushel per acre, and a mile away you had a field for maybe an earlier maturing variety that got freeze back in April, and got freeze damage back in April, and that is yielding 20.
Right.
So there's a lot of variability this year, and there are several causes for that variability this year. So what are some of the causes, or what are the main causes that we're seeing throughout the state? Well, by far, one of the main causes for low wheat yields or high area abandonment is wheat streak mosaic. Another factor that we had affecting wheat yields this year, or actually we should say wheat stands, was back last fall. We had a very, very dry topsoil, especially in southwest Kansas, that resulted in several fields with erratic stands, very poor stands.
Right. Some came up, and then some didn't come up until springtime.
Yeah, we had fields with maybe 30-40% emergence in the fall, and then just after that blizzard in January, that's when those fields came up. So very scattered stands and a lot of variability in that southwest corner of the state, some parts of northwest Kansas as well.
Right.
As we are in the western Kansas part of the state, we actually need to talk also about that snowfall that we had in May. So late April, early May, we had as much as 21 inches of snow, and that also affected wheat yields and caused a lot of variability, field-to-field variability as well, with differences between varieties, difference between planting dates, affecting how the crop responded to that snowfall.
It did add a little moisture to the soil profile.
It did. I don't think moisture was, in the end, a limiting factor for us this season, at least for the majority of the state, but it did cause us to be very concerned. When we talk about central Kansas, we had a lot of fields showing symptoms of nitrogen deficiency in a large portion of the state that I think also cost us some bushels on the state. We had freeze damage in portions of the state, both north central as we go into northwest and southwest Kansas as well. The heat that came in June, so from first 2 weeks of June, kind of caught that crop in western Kansas, also probably decreased some bushels out there.
Because it was a little bit later maturity-wise.
Exactly. It was not ready to harvest, and temperatures were pretty hot, so caused some damage there. Hail, we have several fields that got hail damage. So really a lot of field-to-field variability this year, and we'll be glad to discuss some of these.
We've got to take a break right now, and we'll continue that conversation. Folks, we've got to take a break. Stay tuned after these words from our sponsors.
Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
ValleyVet.com, ValleyVet.com, Valley Vet Supply.
Soil is the life of a farm, and for 25 years, SureCrop Liquid Crop Nutrition has helped growers produce abundant quality crops while preserving and improving the soils they steward. SureCrop offers complete soil and plant analysis with cropping recommendations, delivery direct to your on-farm storage, and quality crop nutrition custom blended for your field. Choose SureCrop for the assurance of excellence for your soil. Call today or visit their website for more information.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, and with us we have the Wheat Extension Specialist at K-State, Dr. Romulo Lollato. Romulo, when we finished up, we were talking about all the causes of the variability to the wheat yields across the state. But the first one you mentioned was a big one, and you know, continues to be a big one, the wheat streak mosaic. So let's talk a little bit how that came about, why wheat streak was so devastating this year.
Yes, Jim, I think by far wheat streak is probably the problem that caused us more yield loss in the state, yield and area abandonment as well. So if we think the entire third of the state had way above levels of wheat streak mosaic throughout that entire third of the state, but we are also seeing in the central portion of the state, some fields in Saline County that were pretty much devastated by wheat streak mosaic. So it was a very widespread problem. And again, if we think of the wheat streak mosaic, a few things that may have caused that widespread problem was, one, we had a moist summer. So that caused several flushes of volunteer. I talked to some producers who were controlling their volunteer wheat, and they had to control 4 times. And then the economy doesn't play in your favor, right? Especially, or the immediate economy of controlling that volunteer wheat doesn't play in your favor.
Yeah, it costs money every time you go across the field.
Yep, exactly. So I think that moist summer that we had was one of the causes that we had so much volunteer and some farmers just not controlling it. But also we had a warm fall. So that warm fall, it plays in a couple ways. First, the mites are there for a longer period of time, right, or active for a longer period of time.
The wheat curl mite, which carries the virus.
Exactly, the wheat curl mite that carries the wheat streak mosaic virus. And those warm temperatures, they also play against the genetic resistance that some of the varieties have, like Oakley CL or Joe.
That's a good point.
They have a gene called WSM2 that gives them resistance to the virus of wheat streak mosaic. And that resistance breaks down at about 70 degrees or so.
Anything above 70 degrees.
Exactly, so above 70 degrees. So those things together, the moist summer and that warm fall, and a warm winter as well, we didn't really have much of a winter, probably caused this outbreak of wheat streak mosaic that we're seeing. There are hot spots in the state where you're traveling, and I'll give you an example of a few counties here. Lane County is one where we had a hot spot of wheat streak mosaic. So
Scott County, Scott County to the west.
Scott County, Wichita County as well, Greeley, Hamilton County. So that area, we had a hot spot where we were traveling for 40, 50 minutes on a highway, and seems like every single field on both sides of the road were 8 inches tall, bright yellow, just completely devastated by wheat streak mosaic. So really frustrating for producers who control their volunteer, maybe had a neighbor who couldn't get after their volunteers or didn't control, and that caused a widespread community problem. So we really need to focus on controlling volunteer wheat. That's the key to controlling wheat streak mosaic in the next season, is making sure they have a good control.
I've got to stop you there. Time for a break. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. See you in a minute.
Ag Promo Source is a unique group of marketing specialists with one mission: help your ag business grow. Each affiliate has their own area of expertise, and they work together to bring you advice, products, and services. To get started, visit agpromosource.com. Ag Promo Source. Together we grow.
Hello friends, I'm Ernie Rodina.
And I'm Dawn Dawson with the Better Horses Radio Show.
For over 9 years, we've been bringing the Better Horses Radio Show to markets all across the Midwest. We talk about God, lots about horses.
We talk about cows, we talk about horse health, we talk to top trainers, and we even talk about Roy Rogers.
We're having a blast with Better Horses Radio Show and would love to take it to a market near you.
So visit our website at betterhorsesradio.com and let us or your local radio station know you'd like to hear it in your area.
The Better Horses Radio Show is unbelievable.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer. Romulo Lollato is with us, our extension wheat specialist. And Romulo, we finished up on wheat streak pretty much on the problems we had with it. And one of the other ones that you mentioned was the blizzard of 2017, late April, early May of this year. Wow, who had ever guessed that we'd have that much snow that late in the season, and the wheat was so far advanced?
Yeah, Jim, that was a very odd event. That even talking to farmers that have been farming for 50 years, they haven't seen that late before. So we got anywhere from 3 to 4 inches in the edges of the blizzard of snow, all the way to over 21 inches in the center of that blizzard, which was the majority of that western Kansas. Almost the western third of the state got hit by that blizzard on April 29th and May 1st. The crop was about pre-boot stage up in northwest Kansas, all the way to about antithesis in southwest Kansas. So that got us really concerned about 2 possible consequences.
Right.
So one, just the cold damage, especially in the crop that was at antithesis already.
Flowering.
Yep, at flowering. So many hours, around 32 there, that could cause some damage to those flowers. But the second one was just the mechanical damage to the stems, just breaking the stems towards the base. So what we were seeing in many fields out there in western Kansas is that very close to that first node, the stem was kinked because of the weight of that snow. And then in the very next node, we had that stem starting to come up, and in the node following that, the wheat was going.
That's a hormonal response that causes the stem to come back up, right?
Exactly. So it's a hormone that causes the plant to grow towards light, and gave it that gooseneck shape to several of those tillers. So we were wondering about tiller abortion, and we're also wondering about low test weights and low yield.
Right.
I guess luckily our conditions during May were relatively cool and moist, so cooler than average, and we had more precipitation than average, and that favored grain filling even in those fields that got hurt by that snow. So we were seeing some stem breaking, maybe anywhere from 1 to 5%, where it was a field with low instance of stem breakage, to over 20-30% of the stems that were broken, depending on the field, depending on variety maturity as well, and position on the field, depending on several factors. Whenever the June heat came, we saw some stems aborting. So going in those fields in southwest Kansas, we're seeing some of the stems that were just drying back.
Yeah, right. Died.
Just dying. Yeah, because they couldn't keep up with the demand from the atmosphere because of that heat. And we were concerned with test weights as well. Seems like yields have been, some producers reporting even 60 bushel per acre yields coming out of that snow, which makes us wonder how much it could have yielded if it wasn't for the snow.
Right.
So definitely that snow, it hurt us some. We aborted some tillers. We probably hurt some on test weight as well. But because of the cool and moist conditions that we had, it's probably not as bad as we originally thought.
It wasn't as severe.
Exactly. So we really didn't have much of an idea of where the crop could go. It could be a 50% loss, or it could be maybe a 10% loss. And I think luckily because of the weather pattern that we had, the loss was not as large as it could have been.
We've got to take a break. Folks, we'll be right back after these words from our sponsor. See you in a minute.
Tarwater Farm and Home has been family owned and operated since its beginning in 1978. What you need for farm and agriculture, lawn and garden, clothing and footwear, and so much more. You'll be surprised at what you'll find in this huge store. They have what you need and lots of it. So come take a look. You'll discover that customer service is first and foremost. Always has been with the Tarwaters. Tarwater Farm and Home, 4107 North Topeka Boulevard.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn. for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com. That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, and with us we have Dr. Romulo Lollato, our Extension Wheat Specialist. Romulo, we've talked about wheat streak, we've talked about the blizzard of April, late April and early May. Let's talk about some of the central Kansas, some of the nitrogen effects or lack thereof this year.
So Jim, if we go back around April or so, I was traveling throughout the central portion of the state, south central all the way to southwest, and I was seeing several fields just looking nitrogen deficient. So they were shorter, they had smaller heads, kind of a pale green color to them, and they had some cow, or they had some spots of higher fertility or cowpox on those fields that you could tell that, well, that field outside of those cowpox was nitrogen deficient.
Right.
And these went from Meade County all the way up to Stafford County or so, and into Cowley County, so a pretty large region of the state where I was consistently seeing symptoms of nitrogen deficiency. And later on, similar region where we saw a lot of water logging, large portions of the fields drowned
Like
out.
McPherson County.
Exactly, McPherson, we had quite a bit of that, Sumner County as well. So that entire south central to southwest portion of the state. So a few possible causes that we have this year are, one, the wheat price. So as we were talking earlier, as low as it was, producers were not as willing to go out and trigger that application of fungicide, right? So I think we saw several producers who actually decreased their nitrogen rate, or straightforward didn't apply any, just relying on that soil nitrate, nitrogen.
Or starter.
Or starter,
right.
Yes. So I think we saw a lot of that, just producers cutting back because of the wheat price. But then if you're relying on that soil nitrogen at sowing, one of the things that we are also seeing in our soil test results from this year is that we're going into the season with a depleted profile, with an empty tank, right? We didn't, because of the bumper crop that we had last year on wheat, and also because of the high use that we had on the summer crops, we most likely went into the growing season with less nitrogen than what we're used to.
In that profile.
In that profile, so we can rely on it less. So I think that's also one of the causes. We're relying on something that we actually didn't have this growing season. And finally, I also think that the amount of rainfall that we had after about March 15th is what caused a lot of nitrogen loss. Maybe some leaching, some denitrification as well. So those three things combined are what I would suspect were the causes.
Right. Thank you. We got to take another break. Folks, we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
This is Eric Stonestreet, and as many of you know, I love my home state of Kansas. In March, Kansas ranchers lost homes, equipment, and thousands of cattle from the largest wildfires in the state's history. Imagine losing all you have in a fire. Not just your house, but your livelihood. Ranchers are beginning to rebuild, but it will take years and tens of millions of dollars to build back herds, fences, and other infrastructure. Today, I'm asking you to help. Donate what you can and show your support to the ranchers of Kansas. Simply go to kansasfires.com. Your donation is tax deductible and will go to those who need it the most.
As fourth-generation farmers themselves, Heinen Brothers Ag Service understands the risk and rewards of farming. So when it comes to quality aerial and ground application, fertilizer, ag chemicals, and anhydrous ammonia, call Heinen Brothers Ag today, 800-760-4964.
I had this horse, it was a good horse, except for when the wind was blowing above 30 miles an hour. Wind was blowing about 35, 40, and I saddled him up, rode him out to the end of the lane, and I thought, well, he's doing pretty good. And about 6 jumps later, I was laying on the ground and thinking, boy, my shoulders sure hurt. I kept waiting, and it didn't get better, and so I went to orthopedic surgeon, and that showed that I had torn rotator cuff. And said, well, we'll have to do surgery. I thought, I farm and ranch by myself. This is not going to work out very well. I'd been sleeping in my recliner for about 2.5 years because it hurt too much to sleep in bed on my side. And I'd heard about Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center on the radio and gotten down there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 11:30 the procedure was all over. They just took some fat out of my side here and spun that down for about 45 minutes and then injected it in my shoulders, and I was on my way. It's something you don't hear about, but I thought it was worth a try, and I'm really pleased. It's really worked out well for me.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities, big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer. Dr. Romulo Lollato, the Extension Wheat Specialist at K-State, is still with us. He didn't run off during that last break. And Romulo, April, May of this year, I was starting to get really worried about stripe rust. You know, the weather conditions were just perfect for stripe rust to come in, and you know, I heard stuff down in Texas that it was there, but it never really made much of a problem, but leaf rust did.
You're right on, Jim. So back in April, we were concerned because we had cool temperatures, we had moisture, available moisture there, so we were really concerned with stripe rust, and for some reason it was kept in check. Actually, leaf rust came a little bit later in the season, but still it was early May, and we were seeing some concerning levels of leaf rust in south central Kansas, and actually and it moved up in the state as well. So many of the varieties that don't have much of a resistance to leaf rust were showing quite a bit of incidence and severity of that disease as early May in south central Kansas.
Right, right.
So I think this year gave us a chance to really look at the genetic resistance on some of these varieties, because we haven't really had many years where leaf rust was as intense as we had this year.
Because stripe rust took out all the leaves and there wasn't any room for leaf rust in years past.
Exactly. So early on the season, stripe rust just took on these past seasons. But this year we had the chance to see that, and we also had the chance to take a look at the type of response that we can expect from a fungicide application in this season when we have a severe leaf rust as we had this growing season. So from our research plots that we have throughout the state on paired plots, same varieties, with and without fungicide, we were seeing anywhere, like in resistant varieties, maybe just a 2-3 bushel per acre yield gain when the variety had good resistance to leaf rust, all the way to over 10 bushels per acre in more susceptible varieties. So that reminds producers that they have the genetic resistance to choose and to use that as a tool if they're not willing to spray a fodder fungicide. But that also tells us that with genetic fodder fungicides, as cheap as they are, it is an option, and it is an option that we should at least be prepared to pull the trigger if we need, because the yield gain has been there in this last 2 years at least that I've been around.
You know, one thing that I had many producers tell me was that, you know, once again, that price of wheat, you know, at the time that they were trying to make that decision to pull the trigger, you know, they're going, well, you know, yield potential is not going to be that good, but it turned out yield potential was very good.
Yeah, so it turned out to be a good year, and the response was there for most of these varieties. So in a year like this, it is especially important for producers to understand their genetic resistance, because if they have a variety that provides better genetic resistance to leaf rust, or last year, for example, to stripe rust, they have that tool that they might not need to spray a fodder fungicide. Now, especially in a year like this when wheat price is $3 per bushel.
Well, you know, when it's approaching 5 or higher, that decision is a little bit easier. They can see a better return on the money spent on that input cost of the fungicide.
Definitely. So at higher yield potentials, the return is generally there as well. And that's one thing that we're looking in our research plots is we're trying to go by top yield of that environment. So in a 30 bushel per acre yield environment, what is the type of response that we have? In a 50 bushel per acre yield environment, what's the type of response that we had? And these last couple of years also are allowing us to look at the 70, 80 bushel per acre yield environment. What type of response do we have? And this is all information that's going to be coming through K-State here in the next few months, and producers can access that through social media like Twitter or Facebook or K-State Agronomy e-updates. So this is all information that's going to be available for producers to access.
Romulo, thanks as always for being on the show. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you,
Folks,
Jim.
thanks for being with us on this show of That's My Farm. And don't forget, next week about this same time, we'll have another one of That's My Farm. See you then.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. To see this show and past episodes of Ag AM in Kansas, go online to agamInKansas.com.